Most people with too many ideas think that their problem is discipline or focus or maybe consistency. They think they need a better system, a stricter routine, fewer distractions, or just a better calendar or a different app. But that usually isn't the real problem. The real problem is that ideas are often being used in place of life. Having ideas feel productive, it feels intelligent. It gives us a sense of movement without requiring the humiliation of contact. We get to feel creative, charged, ambitious, full of possibility, while remaining completely untested. The idea stays perfect there. It's untouched, and it hasn't had to pass through our actual capacity, resistance, or any embarrassment, our inconsistency or habit of disappearing the moment something becomes repetitive or difficult. In the mind, the idea is royalty. In reality, it has to come down here and live among the bins. That's the first thing people don't want to admit. They say they love creating. Often they love imagining. They love the ignition and the burn. They love the first electric hit when something lands and suddenly they are just pacing around, opening tabs, writing notes, feeling chosen, feeling like something big is about to happen. It is a very specific kind of high, not chaotic, more like being emotionally stoned on your own potential, standing in the kitchen with tea, whispering, "This could actually be huge," while the last 4 huge things are sitting half-built in some folder like abandoned carnival rides. And that high is not trivial. It gives relief. It gives meaning. It gives a temporary sense of identity. Now we are not just a person in an ordinary day with ordinary limits. Now we are a person with a vision, a person on the edge of something, a person who sees what others don't. And that alone can be enough to keep the whole machine going, which is why so many people become serial starters. Starting lets us remain in relationship with possibility without having to suffer the collapse into the real. The minute something becomes real, it gets worse. It loses purity. It becomes technical, repetitive, awkward. The thing that feels or felt brilliant at the shower now has to survive Tuesday afternoon. It has to survive our mood, our schedule, our inability to tolerate being average for a while. Most ideas died there, not because they were bad, but because the fantasy has ended and the work has begun. That is where the real split shows up. In the beginning, the ideas feed the image beautifully. We feel interesting, original, alive, maybe even ahead of the curve. But later, when the work becomes plain and repetitive, the image gets almost nothing. No grand payoff, no inner fireworks, just process. And just doing the next obvious part while feeling much less special than we did one day before. A lot of people cannot tolerate this drop, that they interpret this as a sign that something is wrong. They think they lost the spark, or maybe this is not the right project after all. Or maybe there is another idea that feels more alive, and there usually is. There is always another idea. The mind produces new beginnings, the way a dog produces hair. The question is not whether another idea can be found. The question is why the existing one had to die the moment it stopped making us feel exceptional. This is where unfinished project starts piling up in a very embarrassing way. And that is why some people stay in endless preparation, just researching, renaming, gathering inspiration, rebuilding the workflow, reorganizing the plan, whether now is the right season, whether they need more clarity. And the whole thing just looks very responsible. It often feels intelligent. And sometimes it's just a fear wearing glasses. Because once we really commit, something gets risked. We may discover that we were not as consistent as we imagined. We may produce something decent instead of extraordinary. We may hit the part where it becomes boring. We may have to finish without certainty, without the magical feeling, without that emotional soundtrack that made the beginning feel sacred. We may have to become one of those unfancy people who just kept going. And that is not the glamorous story most people want. They want to be the kind of a person for whom great things arrive whole, with passion intact, with destiny going half the lift, with destiny doing half the lifting. They want inspiration to carry them through the hard middle like a drunk prophet. And usually it doesn't. Usually it leaves very early, and then we find out whether anything more real was there. And there is another trap here too. Sometimes people do not finish because the unfinished state protects the idea from judgment. An unwritten book can still be genius. An unlaunched project can still be revolutionary. A half-built thing remains padded by imagination. But once finished, it can be seen, measured, ignored, rejected, or worse, just simply ordinary. So we keep it in the realm of almost, where it stays flattering. That is a brutal place to live because it creates a constant sense of false motion. And we are always close, always developing something, always about to, always circling a future version of ourselves who apparently does finish things and who, for some reason, never arrives. We become the one with ideas, the one with vision, the one who is working on a lot right now, which often means nothing has crossed into consequence. And the cost is bigger than people think. It is not just a productivity problem. After enough unfinished things, we begin to mistrust our own excitement. Every new idea arrives carrying the corpses of the others. We already know the pattern. The rush, the notes, the late night clarity, the little private speech about how this time is different, and then the soft disappearance once the thing asks for continuity. It becomes humiliating a little bit, quietly, and we stop believing ourselves. But that is also where the opportunity is. Once we stop worshipping inspiration, something sturdier can appear. We can let the idea become smaller, less magical, less identity enhancing, and therefore more buildable. We can stop asking the project to keep thrilling us and start asking whether we are willing to stay in contact after the thrill leaves. We can discover that finishing is not a climax. It is usually just a result of not abandoning the thing during its least flattering phase. And that changes everything. It means we no longer have to wait for the perfect inner state. We no longer have to treat every dip in energy like a message from the universe. And we no longer have to keep replacing the real thing with a more exciting almost thing. We can just continue. Not spiritually, just as someone who finally got tired of getting high on beginnings. And most people think they never finish because they have too many ideas. Usually, they never finish because ideas are still serving them better in fantasy than they would in form. because fantasy keeps them inflated. Form brings them down to size. And in my book, Wanting Illusion, I go much deeper into this mechanism to expose real movement in life. It goes from the clarity-seeking trap into the procedural game, living from contact in reality. You'll find it in the description. And that is exactly why form matters. A finished thing, even if smaller than imagined, does something endless possibilities never can. It enters reality. It leaves the private theater of self-image and becomes part of the world. It may wobble, it may be imperfect, but it moves something. It can meet something. It can begin a life outside our head.